So, what I'm going to do is just some quick introductions, and then we'll dive into the actual conversation. So, my name's Vic Lyons, and I've been hosting these spaces for quite a number of years now, and they're always fantastic. They always have great speakers joining us, and I think we've learned so much. This evening, I'm sure, is going to be no exception. So, Andrew, can I ask you to unmute and just say briefly who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Am I coming through okay, Vic?
Hi, Andrew. We can hear you. Do you want to just say?
Yeah, sure. So, Andrew Swindells. I am a carer for my mum, and also alongside my wife, my mother-in-law as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Relief number one over, because your voice is working and your mic is working and I can hear you. So, Gerald, do you want to say hello?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Gerald King. Everybody calls me Jerry. I'm 60 years old, and I was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 55. Pleasure to meet everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jerry, for agreeing to do this. And of course, thank you to Andrew. So I can now relax for the evening because you can both speak, which is fantastic news. So tonight we're going to be talking about working and living with dementia, as you would expect, because this is the topic of the conversation. And how we're going to do the evening is I'll give you a little bit of information about why we're having this conversation, but then really we're going to hand over to both Jerry and Andrew, because we want to hear from you guys, the people who it's your voice that's important. And of course, the voice of people living with dementia and their families is absolutely what's important to us at Dementia UK, and actually far more interesting to people than listening to me talking. But why we're having this conversation is we know we've got an ageing population. We know that dementia is affecting more and more people across the world globally, as well as, of course, across the UK. And we know that increasingly, as the age of retirement goes up, more and more people in the workplace than ever before are going to be affected by dementia. We know that there's also around about 71,000 people who are living with what's called young onset dementia. This is dementia where the symptoms develop under the age of 65. And we also know that a rough statistic indicates around about 18% of people continue to work after a diagnosis. Now, that's quite an old figure, and it's a figure that will undoubtedly change because more and more people are actually still in work at the age of 65 and under. And if you think about young onset, it's where the diagnosis typically occurs between the ages of about sort of 30 to 65. So, and the chances are that those people are going to be working. We know that in terms of carers and families living with dementia, around 21% of carers will tell us that they have to give up work or reduce their hours as a result of their caring responsibility, because actually working becomes more and more of a challenge as their loved one or family member needs more and more support. And we also know that carers often tell us that they feel isolated in the workplace. They feel that talking about actually what's going on and actually their experience of supporting someone with a diagnosis of dementia whilst still trying to work and perhaps caring for younger children as well, it can be really quite a challenge for people, and people sometimes get to a point where they think, actually, I can't necessarily continue on with my work. But for some people that's not an option, obviously, because of financial expectations and outlay that they have to make. Dementia, as we know on this call, is something that over time will change, and somebody will decline with the dementia over time, which actually means over time someone's ability to work may well change as well. So if you think of people with young onset, they're likely to be in the workplace when they first experience some of these symptoms, but still working. What might that actually mean, and what might the impact be? So if you think about the typical symptoms that we think about with dementia, and I'm absolutely mindful, of course, that with younger people, the typical symptoms may not be the ones that you see. But if you think about things like cognitive decline, so, typically someone may experience problems with memory, attention, reasoning, problem solving. And in the early stages of a diagnosis, those things actually might not have much of an impact on somebody, and you may well be able to continue your day-to-day job perfectly fine without necessarily any need for any massive adjustments. However, as the dementia progresses, that can change for people, and they might start to find it more difficult. And actually, I was talking to somebody recently who was talking about even getting to work, driving or using public transport became a difficulty. Someone might have communication problems with language, which might make it harder to dialogue with colleagues, clients, customers, and continue with the tasks that you need to do in your job. And of course, other people might experience changes in their behaviour, their personality. And these can have an impact, of course, on the relationships that you've got with your co-workers, your supervisors, and also lead to conflicts and misunderstandings in the workplace. And I think the other really common misconception that people still have is that if you get a diagnosis of dementia, you have to stop work and you can't work. And that's not true. Actually, with the right adjustments in place, with the right support, you hopefully should be able to continue working. In fact, it would be unlawful to dismiss somebody just because they'd got this diagnosis. For some jobs, there is safety concerns associated with somebody working. So obviously, if you're in a job where having a diagnosis of dementia and having those perhaps that impacting on your abilities to perform your job is going to put yourself or other people at risk, or potentially be hazardous if you're operating heavy machinery, driving, or dealing with hazardous substances, for example. It might actually be that your employer makes the decision and you make the decision that it's no longer safe for you to continue in your workplace. But for many people, actually, say with adaptations, with role changes, you absolutely can carry on working for as long as you wish to do so, and of course for as long as the employers also feel that you're able to maintain your job and do the tasks associated with your job. So that's why we're having this conversation, and I lead on a piece of work that we're doing at Dementia UK to work to make workplaces more dementia inclusive, to work with employers, businesses to really enable people living with dementia and their carers to stay in work, to contribute meaningfully, to live fulfilled lives, because for many of us, work is part of our identity. It's part of who we are, what we do, our reasons and our purposes. I may not be the case for all people, but for lots of people, it's a huge part of our identity. So that's the kind of backdrop, if you like. That's to why we're having this conversation, the factors that you may want to consider and think about as we discuss the topic further this evening. I will talk a little bit more later on about some of the reasonable adjustments, but I'm going to go to Gerald now, because really I think what everybody probably wants to hear is something about your personal experience. So can I start off a little bit by asking you to share some of your journey? And actually, what sort of job did you do? What can you tell us about that, please? Jerry, are you still there?
Can you? My mic's back on again.
Your mic is back on. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Hi, Victoria. Yes, I was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 55. At that time, I was in full-time employment. I worked for the local council in the architects department. My remit was to work with the 5 councils' occupational therapists, meet them on sites with their clients, and redesign their houses to make them wheelchair accessible for future use. What I would normally do is I would normally send a memo to the occupational therapist, suggesting a time and a date for a meeting. I would put that in my diary, and obviously on the day of the meeting, I would go out to meet them. And for some strange reason, I was going out to meet OTs, and I'd be sitting at the client's house for maybe an hour or 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, and no OT would turn up. Feeling rather confused, I would go back to the office, phone up the OT, and ask why they hadn't turned up at the meeting. And they would say that I hadn't actually sent a memo asking them to turn up on that day and that date. I'd actually put the date in my diary, but I hadn't actually sent the memo out to the OTs to confirm a time and date of the visit. I was also having problems with my driving at the time as well, because my Alzheimer's doesn't just affect my short-term memory; it affects my visual awareness, and I was finding it difficult to park the car in between the lines in a parking bay. And it got that bad that eventually I had to get out the car and get the wife to park the car for me because I just couldn't get it in there. And what happened was that it took about 18 months for my diagnosis through a lot of testing with a specialist unit at Victoria Hospital. During the 18 months, I was still working full time, but right at the start of the diagnosis process, I was asked to surrender my driving license. Now, driving was 50% of my working day. I live in a place called Fife, which is quite rural, and it's quite a big county in Scotland. So to get from one place to another, you do need a car. That had quite a major effect on my working pattern straight away. Whereas before I could maybe arrange 3 meetings with OTs in the morning and a couple in the afternoon. I was now down to possibly 1 in the morning and maybe 1 in the afternoon, because I was relying on public transport. And if you're going from, say, Kirkcaldy, which is central Fife, to St Andrews, which is the far east of Fife, it can take you up to an hour, possibly even more, on a bus to get there. And then you would need another bus to get from the bus station to wherever you're going to go in your destination in St Andrews. So my work, I suppose, capacity really was reduced by probably well over a third. In fact, probably well over a half, actually. Where I was producing maybe 15 to 20 surveys a week, I went down to about 4 or 5 a week, because that's all I could get out to do. We tried asking some of the OTs to pick me up and take me, but again, although that was fine, my capacity for doing the work was still reduced because the way I worked was I would organise like visits in a certain area of Fife, which may actually include 3 or 4 different OTs. So it was impossible to have one OT come to pick me up in Kirkcaldy and then bring me back, and for another one to come back and pick me up and all this sort of stuff. It was very difficult. I was also having problems with my computer. I used a program called AutoCAD, and I've been using that for about 15 years. And probably for the last couple of years of my employment, I could switch my computer on. I could get to the program, but I forgot how to actually use it. And probably for the last year and a half, the very kind Ian, who sat beside me, spent many hours fixing the problems that I created because I couldn't remember how to use a program. It was an interesting time, really.
Yeah. You've given us so much information there. Thank you. That was fantastic. And
Is that okay?
yeah,
Yep.
no, that was fantastic. I've got some more questions I want to ask you though. So do you, in terms of the symptoms when you've noticed them, it sounds like from what you've just said that the kind of the first symptoms you noticed were kind of actually at work, or is that correct? Or were you noticing signs outside of work as well?
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, I never noticed any symptoms at the start. It was my wife and my father-in-law noticed the changes in me. I was my whole body language was changing. I used to be a right laid back person, nothing fazed me. And my wife tells me I was getting quite belligerent and quite argumentative. And that's when she realised that there was something wrong. I was also getting very forgetful. I'd have conversations with my wife and I couldn't remember what we were talking about. And I probably asked her the same questions maybe 30, 40 times a day. To me, that was just me getting a bit older. I never for once, for a minute, thought it was dementia or anything like that. Like,
Yeah. What else did you think? Because I know often people, when they're working as well, they say things like, "Oh, I thought it was maybe work stress," or or like you
yeah,
said, getting older. Did you, or I've known other people even say they thought it was depression or anxiety due to work or all sorts of things.
absolutely, yeah.
Do you remember if you thought any of those things or?
I thought I might be a bit stressed, to be honest. I mean, my job covers, I'd say, the whole of Fife, which is a very big county, and I was the only person that did the job.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very busy job. Um, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved the job. But I think if the OTs had their way, I'd have been working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But
It was a stressful job anyway. Yeah.
unfortunately, I didn't have the time for that. But yeah, it was very stressful. And I did think I was
Yeah.
stressed out for a while.
And do you know how long you worked once you had received the diagnosis? How long were you able to stay in work?
Yeah, I worked all the way through the diagnosis stage, which took about 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually worked all through that time, although my work was pretty badly affected, as I say, because I was limited to where I could go, limited to what I could do. And then once the diagnosis actually came through, it was really discussed with my management, and it was decided really that because I was having problems with the computer and because I couldn't drive anymore, it would be the best option would be for me to retire on ill health.
Can I ask you about the driving? So, because
Yes.
you mentioned that you mentioned you were advised to stop driving. Was that
Yes.
because of your diagnosis? It wasn't safe for you to drive anymore. Was that assessed or?
Yes, that was yeah. I didn't get an assessment, driving assessment as such, um, but through discussions with the neurologist and the psychologist, it was agreed that I shouldn't drive anymore. I actually had an accident in Asda's car park one day. I hit a poor woman who was parked beside me in the car, and didn't realise I'd hit her. Hit the car. I didn't hear nothing. I didn't feel nothing or see nothing. And it wasn't until I got out of the car, I got a bit angry because she was like shaking her fist at me, and I jumped out the car, and then there was a big huge score right down the side of her car, and I thought, I've just hit her car and didn't realise I could do it. Like,
Yeah.
and it was after discussions with the professionals that was decided that my license should be taken away.
Okay, that makes sense because, of course, a diagnosis of Alzheimer's doesn't actually automatically mean you would have to stop driving. I know lots of people might be shocked by that, but maybe people might not be shocked by that. But
Yep.
actually, having that diagnosis on its own doesn't mean you have to stop driving. It just means that you've got a legal duty to tell the DVLA and then
Yep.
to have those assessments. So I was just going to pick that a little bit with you. I've got another question to ask you. So in terms of, I know you mentioned that you spoke to your manager about it, and spoke to work about this. Now, obviously, without wanting you to have to disclose anything you feel uncomfortable around that,
Not at all.
how did that feel, talking to your manager? Because I know it can be challenging. It can be something people are anxious about and worried about. And
Yeah.
so how
Um,
did that feel?
to me, it actually felt okay. I mean, I'd been working with the same people for around 32 years. I knew them all well. Some of them weren't just like managers; they were friends. We'd worked through the whole stages of them going through management and all that sort of stuff. So I knew them all well. So I didn't mind discussing about it. I think it was more the fact that they were quite surprised that I'd been diagnosed at such a young age. Um, yeah, I think that was the main thing that came across the most. They were actually very helpful. I was one of the lucky ones. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people don't have such luck, but I worked for a council that was good to me. and we discussed everything. We discussed other options, but I was on what they call a final salary pension. So if I'd taken like another job, which was probably would have to have been like a more menial sort of job, my pay would have been reduced quite substantially, which would have had a knock-on effect on my pension, and which really made me my mind personally that I was better just taking the ill health retirement as it stood.
That makes sense. And do you know did you speak to other work colleagues as well, and were they again equally supportive? I'm going to assume perhaps
Yep.
yes, but that might be me leading you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Yep, yep. No, that's no. As I say, I mean, for the 18 months during my diagnosis process, I was making a lot of mistakes on the computer, and my colleague Ian, who sat beside me, I can't commend him enough for his patience. Like, I mean, every half an hour, probably to an hour, I'd be saying, "Ian, can you come and sort this? I've done something wrong. I've pushed the wrong button here somewhere." Like, and never complained. Would come across and fix it for me, and it was great. I found that the OTs were very helpful as well. They were less put less strain on you to get your work done. I found everybody actually to be really quite helpful, which was quite surprising actually.
Yeah, but I guess perhaps also it's partly because of the environment and the role you were in. It may be, or although I guess in lots of places, people are going to be very understanding and supportive,
Yeah,
aren't they? And
yeah.
I think most people would probably want to be like that. In terms of now, because obviously I know you took the retirement, but in a way you kind of still are working actually, aren't you? You're a very busy gentleman doing lots of things. So what can you tell us a little bit about what you do now?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, my pleasure. When I was diagnosed, first of all, in Fife, there was absolutely nothing for people under the age of 55, under the age of 65. Everything was set up for people 65 and older, and further on down the line on their dementia journey. I actually visited a couple of Alzheimer's Scotland workshops, and personally, to me, they were absolutely awful. It wasn't what I needed at that time, and I never went back. And to be honest, I thought, "Oh my God, is this what I've got to look forward to for the next few years?" Again, and I got quite depressed quite quickly. But I was lucky. I met a lovely lady called Ruth McCabe, who's working with the council as their dementia awareness kind of officer. We struck up a friendship, and from there we went round all of Fife, making local businesses dementia friendly, and making a lot of people in Fife dementia friends. We now go into schools and colleges and GP surgeries and like that sort of thing, and make them dementia friendly. And we also do like dementia awareness presentations, in particularly to primary schools. We do that quite a lot nowadays as well. Although I kept myself busy, it still wasn't quite enough. My wife and I needed to speak to people who are of a similar age and a similar stage as myself. So in Fife, we're lucky. We have what's called a post-diagnostic support nurse who is with us through the whole diagnostic procedure, and now she's with me until end of life. So I approached her and asked if I could speak to some more of her clients. So I just needed to speak to somebody at the same age, the same stage as me. So she agreed. And then one Friday afternoon, there's about 15 couples met up at the Alzheimer's Scotland hub in Kirkcaldy. These were like 15 couples who were complete strangers. And within probably about half an hour, you would have thought they'd known each other for years and years and years. There was lots of talk, lots of laughter, tears. These people were, it was just, you were amongst people who just got it, who knew exactly what you were going through. You weren't being judged. You could be you. It was amazing. And really from that day, a peer support group, Stand, was formed. Stand is a peer support group in Fife, which is facilitated by people living with mild to moderate stage dementia and their wives, husbands and families. And we provide peer support to people who might be worried about dementia or who are going through the process of being diagnosed, or who have been diagnosed and don't know where to turn, and the wives, husbands, and families. We do that. Our ethos is to enable people with dementia and to empower people with dementia to be the best they can be and live as well as they want to live with a diagnosis of dementia. We do that through music workshops, art therapy, mindfulness, keep fit, learning new languages, garden, quite a lot of stuff. We don't entertain at all. For example, the music therapy that we do, we actually write original soundtracks and songs. We hire a musician who comes in and he'll maybe like either bring a photograph or bring something a subject for us to write about. And the people with dementia sit and write about this, which of a subject. And then what he does, he takes all our words and lyrics and puts them to music. And we come up with an original soundtrack, original songs, which is absolutely amazing.
Wow.
And the words of people living with dementia. It's their thoughts.
Jerry, you've got to share some of that with me. It just sounds amazing.
I would love to.
It sounds
It's amazing.
so good.
And all the workshops like that, we encourage people to use the faculties that they've got.
Yeah.
Even with the art, somebody doesn't come in and just actually do quite silly things. We actually do stuff that is used. Same with everything. It's the whole point is to enable people to live as well as they want to live.
And that is just the message that we want everybody to hear loud and clear, because, a diagnosis of dementia does not mean that your life is ended and suddenly stops. Actually, it sounds like, yes, of course you had a life before, but it kind of grows and grows and grows. And all of these new things, these things that you're talking about, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's opened a lot more doors for me. Yeah, one door's closed, but 100 other doors have opened.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I've met a lot of very interesting and very inspirational people since being diagnosed, and it's been amazing.
It's fantastic. I honestly, and I mean it. You've got to send me some of that music. That just sounds so good. Just for the purpose of time, I'm just going to do a quick refresh, and then I'm going to come and chat to you, Andrew, and we'll come and chat to you again in a bit as well, Jerry. But thank you so much. I know you can't see me because we're on screen, but hopefully you can hear that I'm smiling away because I've just loved
good stuff.
Everything you said has been fantastic. You've been a great picture of actually what your experience was like.
My pleasure.
So, just a quick reset. If you're in the space, if you're listening, I can see some people who've been here right from the start. If you do have a question, if there's anything you want to ask us, feel free to ping it in the little blue box. If you're just new and you've not joined a space before, you can. There's a little bottom at the bottom of the screen. There's a little thing where you can type in any questions that you've got for any of our guests. And when we've spoken to Andrew for a little bit, you can also request the mic and jump on and ask a question that way too, if you fancy adding your voice to our discussion this evening. So Andrew, I'm going to come to you. Jerry, you can sit back and relax for a bit, have a cup of tea or whatever you're going to do. So Andrew, thank you very much for sitting patiently, and I'm sure you were grinning and fascinated listening to Jerry too, as I was.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you a little bit about your experience? So we've heard from Jerry, but now we're going to hear from your side of the story and your experience. And of course, everybody's experience, people living with dementia, is going to be different. Everybody's unique, and there may be some overlaps, and there may be some points that feel quite different from your point of view as well. So, can I hear a little bit from you, just in setting the scene? Can you tell us a little bit about your job, what kind of role you have, and also a little bit about your mum's diagnosis and the impact that had, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So am I still coming through okay?
You're coming through fantastic, yeah. Andrew.
Perfect. Okay, yes. So I work in IT. I am I work in what's called product management. So I help design and drive what our company delivers as a piece of software to our customers. I work in a leadership role, so I have people in my team, and at the time when Mum was first diagnosed, which was before COVID, so if anyone can remember those times, the before COVID times, I was working for a US organization based in the UK, though, all offices in the UK, and it was very much a traditional, typical office role. I was based in the office, so yeah, commute back and to and so on, as you'd expect. And then Mum's diagnosis was originally we started to get rough ideas of things were going, things weren't great, sort of 2018, 2019 maybe. Mum had some problems with strokes, and she'd had some problems with issues with the brain, and her eyesight and so on had been affected by some illnesses and so on. So at first there was lots of confusion around, was this dementia or was this just something else? Was it just a result of the strokes? And the original diagnosis did actually attribute it to the strokes, which centers on a sort of a skewed journey, if you like, which probably delayed the actual overall dementia diagnosis. But yeah, at the time I was office based and sort of doing a typical 9-to-5 role and so on. And then as we moved into COVID, that's when we actually got the sort of the diagnosis, if you like. That was when it was always confirmed that Mum has vascular dementia, and yeah, that's when as a family then everything sort of changed.
So, sorry, during COVID, then did you start to work from home? Did you work flexibly?
Yeah, absolutely. So just before, actually, I should have mentioned, sorry, Vic. Yeah, so just before sort of COVID happened, we started to have more appointments with sort of different teams and so on, different specialists and so on. And I was really fortunate. I have to be completely transparent. I was really fortunate. So my manager at the time was based in the US. I saw him 2 or 3 times a year in person at best. We had a really good relationship, and I was just really fortunate. I just said to him, look, things aren't great with Mum, and he just turned around and said, well, you've given so much to the organization in terms of your flexibility. You travel around the world, you're away from your family, that it would be completely amiss of me to expect, to not give flexibility back to you. So yeah, I was really fortunate, I must admit. I was probably less fortunate with some people around me, if I'm honest. So maybe not people in my team, but people sort of around me were slightly less accommodating, shall we say? So they were less willing to reschedule meetings, or to allow the fact that for 3 hours of a Tuesday afternoon I was going to be away at hospital or something with Mum and so on. So yeah, interesting. So my leadership was really supportive of it. People, not everybody, but some people around me, they were less supportive, and sort of questioning, oh, where is he again today, type of thing. Sort of off the cuff comments like that. So interesting that you'd expect your peers to maybe be more supportive than your leadership or management. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, it was an interesting time just at the start of COVID. And then I moved like probably like everybody else, moved into this. Ironically, we were told it'll only be 2 weeks, and then we'll all be back in the office. It was like, right, okay, yeah, of course we will. So yeah, we all moved away from the office, and we became remote at that point in time. Yeah, and that's when the official formal diagnosis arrived from Mum.
And when Mum received the diagnosis, did you have other people around to help looking after Mum and making sure her daily needs were met, or did you take on a lot of that responsibility yourself?
So I have to raise my dad's hand at this point in time. So at the time, Mum was still at home with Dad. The whole it was a very traditional relationship, very traditional marriage. They've been my dad passed away recently, but they were married for over 60 years. It was an amazing relationship, but it was very traditional. So what I mean by traditional was man goes to work, man earns money, wife stays at home and looks after the house and kids, type of thing, which was fine. That's just how it was, and it worked for 60 odd years. It was absolutely amazing, and everything sort of changed overnight. So we could do doorstep visits. My mum also had immunity issues as well. So even going into the house would have been like, we were sort of running the risk of giving her COVID and so on. So we all went into this like doorstep visit mode. So Dad just, almost overnight, just flipped the light switch and said, right, well, I'll stop being, the traditional man, and I'll start doing all of those things. So during that initial period, in terms of the diagnosis and so on, we were on the doorstep, and Dad was inside the house, really just doing an amazing job with Mum. Which actually, he did an amazing job with Mum all the way through, if I'm completely honest. So yeah.
But I guess your job then was supporting Dad as well, wasn't it? Supporting Mum and sort of looking after them both as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and
I think.
Go on.
I was going to say, so I think it's really important to point out as well that for my dad, my dad, like I say, he passed away a few weeks ago, 88 this year. He would have been 88 this year in May. And for him, it was like, dementia is just like a word he heard on the TV or on the radio, or the wireless, as he called it. And we never got around that. And as far as wireless internet goes, that never got around. He never understood that. It was just for him, it was dementia was a thing that, maybe you take a tablet and it goes away, or you could have a lie down for half an hour and you feel better afterwards. So he went through this on his own as well, because we were on the doorstep. He went through this strange emotional sort of twist whereby he was coming to terms with the fact that his wife was, had this diagnosis, and she was struggling as well to understand the diagnosis. And then he was also trying to understand, well, where's this magic pill? Can I just give her a magic pill? Give her a Lemsip and a couple of paracetamol or something, and it'll go away. So he was going through that as well. He was like going through his own like denial, or maybe denial is the wrong word to use. So, but it was a crazy time.
It's an adjustment, isn't it, that you have to make, and that kind of learning and adapting to what this kind of new normal looks like. And that's another COVID term, but I think it works when you get that diagnosis. It's actually what's our new normal now. So can I take you back a little bit to your work colleagues, and again, without wanting to cause you any issues in your workplace, and what do you think some of that might have been about? Why you think some of your work colleagues, maybe you sort of said, weren't perhaps as understanding, or a bit disgruntled perhaps, or what do you think that might have been about for them?
Yes, so I'm actually in a different organisation now, so I can talk pretty freely about this. Absolutely, yeah. That person was a right so-and-so. No, I'm joking. So I think that's a really good question. That's actually a really, really good question. So I think a little bit of it was almost like jealousy. So give a little bit of background to it really quickly. So I was part of an organization that acquired the organization I was now working for. So we basically bought this company, and then I moved into that company, the role inside of that company. And as a result of that, what happened was I never felt as though some of the longer term people fully accepted the fact that I was Andrew, who'd come from the mothership almost. Who does he think he is coming into this role, and so on. So I think there's a little bit of that, absolutely. And then I think some other people, they just don't care, if I'm honest with you. I think that was it's like, well, deal with that at home. And I think it's almost like they haven't got an understanding of what dementia is and the impact on the family and so on as well. So it's almost like that. So they were coming at it almost blind, ignorant as well. I think, they thought, again, just take 2 paracetamol and she'll be fine. So they don't have that understanding that, like, well, I'm not rushing home to look after my mum or dad, so why is he doing that? Or why is he having to go to these meetings and so on? So I think there's a tiny bit of jealousy because I came from the mothership. But then I think, lots of misunderstanding about what dementia is and not being able to, sort of relate that to their world or their life, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. And I think, it's dementia is something that if you've not been directly impacted by it in your family, you can't necessarily actually fully appreciate what it might be like, and what that experience might feel like and look like. And there is still a certain degree of stigma and around dementia, and a lack of understanding about what it actually is, and the impact that it may have on people. So I completely understand everything you said there. So Another question then, in terms of balancing your responsibilities and your role, and you've obviously got your job and your work and supporting dad and supporting mum and your wife and your family. How do you think you manage all of that? How do you balance those roles and the different sides of Andrew?
Another really good question. Really badly at first, if I'm honest. I did a really bad job. I really struggled with my own self guilt towards feel as though I wasn't giving 100% to work. I must admit, I struggled with that for a long time, and then I started to realize that you've only got 100% to give across all of these things, so that you can't give 100% completely to work. And then I think I just sort of like reflect on what I could possibly do, and then something that doesn't come easy to me was actually saying to other people, "Can you give us a help? Can you help me out here? Can you help?" And so going to other people that in my team or my peers that I could go to and say, "Look, I'm in this situation. There's no way I can get this work done. Could we do it together?" type thing. So that was hard. That was a hard adjustment for me, was to do that. Not so much the fact that I didn't want to go and ask them, but it's just not something at the time that came naturally to me. But I think actually I'm a better person for it though, because I've learned new skills and approaches because of it. So that they were two big things straight away, and then lots of guilt towards Joe and Josh and Sam. So Joe, my wife, Josh and Sam, my children, and like Joe's mom, my sister, and so on. Yeah, lots of guilt and emotions sort of flying around about having to balance all these things, and thinking at the time I was doing a really bad job of doing it.
Yeah, but it's learning, isn't it? You have to learn how to do this and how to work through the challenges that you face, and form these relationships in a way that works. So don't beat yourself up about that, because I'm sure you did a better job than you perhaps think you did as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remind people, if you do want to ask a question, you can do that. And I'm going to ask both Andrew and Jerry to have a little think about this next question, and I'm just going to share some more information. So Andrew, feel free to stick yourself on mute, and just have a ponder about this question for a little bit. What I want you to answer next, both yourself and Jerry, is actually, what advice would you give to employers around supporting employees living with dementia? And that can be, Andrew, from your point of view, from a carer point of view, and Jerry, obviously your point of view from a person living with dementia. And anybody who's listening, if you want to stick your advice, please stick it into the chat as well, because it'd be great to see this kind of flurry of advice flying in. So what I'm going to share with you quickly is some of the stuff that we're doing at Dementia UK, and also some of the things that I would consider to be reasonable adjustments. So at Dementia UK, we've got a team which is the Dementia at Work team, which is a team that I head up. And what we do is work with employers, with corporates, with businesses, with everybody from transport companies through to lawyers, through to banking institutes, around making their workplace as dementia inclusive as possible, providing masterclasses, training, one-to-one support, consultancy, advice regarding policies and some of the business problems that they're facing, and really encouraging them to think about the impact that the decisions they make as a business will have on people living with dementia, whether that's staff or customers. And you can go on the Dementia UK website and find out how to contact us if that's something you're interested in. So that's a little bit of me just telling you what we're doing, because we realise this is an issue for lots of people, and we're trying to do something to try and change this, so that wherever you are, your experience of dementia, you've got the support around you to help you with that. If you're listening to this and wondering what is a reasonable adjustment, because we know we've mentioned that term a few times, what could a work do? What might good practice look like? So initially, I would be talking about, actually looking at flexible working arrangements for somebody. That's whether that person's a carer or whether that person is the person with the diagnosis. consider that person's job and think about how can we flex this? Do we need to accommodate it and move different times to help fit in with somebody's fluctuating cognitive abilities or energy levels? Do we need to allow someone time to go to medical appointments, or time to work at home so that they're not distracted, or do they need to come into the office so they can work with a buddy? So work together with whoever the person is to identify what's going to help that person, and it will be different for each and every one of us, to make sure that they've got the support they need to enable them to do their job. You might want to think about perhaps simplifying some of the tasks, simplifying the instructions, breaking tasks down, using things. And I can't remember the name of the tool, but Jerry mentioned a tool that he was using, using things in a more simple way, perhaps, so that somebody can do their job. Nowadays, with the AI and the technology advancements, there's all sorts of tools out there that could potentially be used to help somebody stay at work with support around, in terms of technology. And that might also be things such as memory aids, calendars that automatically remind people they've got a meeting coming up, or task management systems which send digital reminders to help somebody keep track of deadlines and tasks. Certainly, Jerry was mentioning about appointments and missing appointments, and you can get things that help in terms of booking those appointments as well. So all of these memory aids potentially are helpful. Some organisations that I've worked with introduce things like buddying schemes, so that somebody who's got the diagnosis of dementia has got a buddy or somebody who's there to provide some support to them, so that they've got somebody who they can go to get some advice and to talk to about the day and the challenges that they may be having. The other thing that is really important to say is that you need to think about the who's doing your supervision. And I think this is actually the same if you're the carer or the person with dementia. It's having somebody around who can provide you with some supportive supervision, someone who can check in with you, who can offer you some constructive feedback, who can let you know, actually, do you know what, you are starting to struggle a bit more, or perhaps some of the deadlines are slipping, or who's willing to do that and offer that constructive feedback to help you stay on track of what you need to do, and address the challenges as you come across them. Again, as I said, mentoring, buddying systems, this provides tremendous support. One of the things that I've worked with people in the past who've kind of had these things in place, and then the buddy starts doing more and more of the role, and so you do have to have an open and honest dialogue with whoever is in that role to check out what's the appropriate parameters. Both, and Andrew particularly mentioned other people and their attitudes. So it is important to think across your organisation, what do people understand about dementia? What awareness have people got? What do managers understand? What do supervisors, co-workers understand? Is training needed? Is something needed so that dementia, and of course mental health and the impact that has, can be considered and discussed in an open and honest way in that workforce, so that it's not sort of a taboo subject that you feel you need to shy away from having conversations about. And in some places, it's also worth thinking about things like signage, the actual environment. Is it easy to navigate your way around? Is it, can somebody get their way to the kitchen, to the toilet, to the office safely if they're travelling on public transport? Is that working okay? And I know that you might sort of go, well, my responsibility is just while they're here in the work environment, but actually checking out with somebody, are you arriving at work safely? Is that feeling okay? Because if you arrive at work and you're already stressed because you've had a horrendous journey getting there, and some of what Jerry was talking about illustrated that really well. So do think about those kinds of additional extra bits as well. And I think the thing is, as the world changes rapidly and we all have to adapt and change, that can be hard anyway, keeping abreast of all of the policy changes, the terminology changes, the digital changes that come in, can be hard for anybody who's working actually to feel abreast of that. If you've got dementia or if you're stressed because you're caring for somebody, it can be even more challenging. So checking out with somebody if they feel they're keeping on top of everything that's going on, especially if they're in a particularly fast-moving environment. It's a good idea to think about that and perhaps give somebody extra time if needed to allow them to keep on top of things and adjust. So hopefully me having a little bit of a closing amble has given Jerry and Andrew time enough to think about the question I posed them both, which is, what advice would you give to employers in terms of supporting employees with dementia? So I think I'll go to you first, Jerry, because we've not spoken to you for a little while. So if you're able to unmute yourself again and answer that question, and if anybody who's listening wants to stick any advice or that they would give, feel free to pop that into the bottom button as well. So Jerry, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, probably advice that I would give to employees, in particular about dementia, is the fact that training is a huge issue. I think dementia awareness, how it can hit you at any stage. So I think a regular training of staff is highly important. Making your business dementia friendly, because I think if you make it dementia friendly, you also make it friendly for a lot of other mental health issues, autism and all that sort of stuff. Particularly with signage and all that, and colour schemes and the likes of that on the walls and the floors and the ceilings and whatever. Giving that person a bit more time to do their work. I know that's not easy because a lot of people's work is on time restraints. Mine certainly was. We had to get our work out within a certain amount of weeks, which didn't help much. I think the opportunity to still be involved, but maybe in a different way. For example, although I lost the ability to drive and I lost the ability to use the computer, the skills that I'd honed over 40 years in an architect's office were still there. So I could still tell you how to design a house. I could still tell you how to install platform lifts and through-floor lifts and adapt a home to make it wheelchair accessible. It's how do you harness that knowledge and experience in the office? That's probably all I've got to say there, Victoria.
That was fantastic. No, that was so good, and you've been absolutely inspirational throughout. Actually, to quote Manny, who's in the space, and there's another comment from Angela who said, she suggested carers passports and how they can be helpful for people, and absolutely, thank you for that contribution, Angela. You're absolutely right. Do look at carers passports and see if that's something that you can get and implement. And again, it's thinking about employer adjustments to support the individual. So thank you. You did it exactly right. And thank you for that contribution as well, because we hadn't mentioned carers passports. Andrew, what advice would you give?
So I go back to the very first conversation I had with my manager at the time, when he said about flexibility. And I think the employee, the person is going to need flexibility, and the chances are that they've offered flexibility in many other ways. So be flexible and just be open to the fact that this person or people, they're going through big changes in their lives and their own family and so on, and be flexible, because if you give them flexibility, they will be flexible back to you as well. So I think it's accept the fact it's happening, don't try to battle against it, and just offer that flexibility. And any support that person needs. So if they're late to work one day for the fact that they were called out to an issue, with the mum was found in the street, for example, and they didn't get to sleep till 7 o'clock that morning. Allow that to happen, because that person the following day will probably be there at 7:30 and finish about 7:30 the following night, if that makes sense. So yeah, flexibility, and just allow that person to go through what they're going through, because they will give so much more back in return for that flexibility.
Perfect. Thank you. Some amazing words of advice there. So thank you tremendously to both of you. I think the bit of advice that I would share as well, I'm going to quote something, Jerry, you said earlier on, and actually Andrew, you've kind of mentioned this too. It's about focusing on what the person can still do, and enhancing that and working with that and being flexible to go with that, and and really focus that way. And I've worked over the years with some tremendous employers who've really been flexible and given so much support to valued members of staff that it's fantastic when it goes right. I've also, of course, sadly heard cases where it hasn't, and people haven't managed to make those adjustments. But hopefully, by having conversations like this and doing things like this, and the work that we're doing, and the work that we've done this evening, helps to reduce that stigma and get people the support that they need. So all that's really left for me to do is some thank yous. So I'm hugely indebted to Andrew and Jerry for your time this evening. I hope you've found it okay contributing. You've both been tremendous guests. It's been wonderful. I've also got to give a big shout out to Manny, who is an absolute Ironman of a legend, and is in the space this evening and is doing the marathon. Again, I don't know where he gets his energy from, so he's probably embarrassed and blushing now, but I can't not send you some love, Manny, and wish you loads of good luck. Also, good luck to anybody else who's running the marathon. You're all completely bonkers, but I admire you. Thank you to Andrew and Jerry. Do you want to just quickly pop up and say your goodbyes to everybody who's listened in the space?
Yes, thank you, Victoria, for having me. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure. Speaking to people is my medication. It helps me to process my own dementia, and hopefully gives an insight, a small insight into what it's like to be living with dementia. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. We honestly couldn't do it without you and your contribution. So thank you, Jerry. Andrew, any just quick say goodbye?
Echo Jerry's comments. Yeah, thanks for having me. And just to say, that if I can help one person, then I've achieved my goal with this. If anyone needs to get in touch with me, feel free to do so.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both tremendously. It's this time always goes so quick. The hour whizzes by, and I think we learn and share so much. So thank you both hugely, and we will now be ending the space. So good luck to everybody doing marathons and anything else. Thank you to my guests, and take care, everybody.